The Pentagon condemning Afghanistan's plans to set free dozens of prisoners, calling them dangerous insurgents who have American blood on their hands. The State Department voicing concerns as well. Listen.
The 37 detainees are dangerous criminals against whom there is strong evidence linking them to terror-related crimes, including the use of improvised explosive devices, the largest killer of Afghan civilians. These insurgents who pose threats to the safety and the security of the Afghan people and the state are being released without an investigation and without the use of the criminal justice system and in accordance with Afghan law.
All right, this comes as a new report is now released that President Hamid Karzai believes the U.S. government is behind insurgent attacks designed to undermine his government. So can the U.S. trust Afghanistan anymore to help stop the spread of terrorism? More importantly, can they trust Karzai? Let's ask Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, senior fellow with London Center for Policy Research, been over there a number of times, now in Washington. Colonel, what's behind the release of these men who are going to come back and kill Karzai?
Well, I think that's the thing. Karzai, I think, is trying to play it down the middle, play both sides against the middle, have his cake and eat it too. He wants to appear like he's trying to appease the Taliban to say that we want to be inclusive. At the same time, Brian, you and I both know this is like a fishing contest, catch and release. That's what's going on here. And at least 17 of these guys were caught with IED material, at least 2 engaged in killing folks. And again, we're not saying that this is a death warrant. We're not turning these people in to be killed. We're turning them in for trial, for them to be worked through the Afghan process of justice. And that's what's most frightening here. The very system we've helped establish is now being used in a very obtuse way to basically release these folks back into the environment where they'll kill our guys and continue to go after the central government.
But, Colonel, they already voted. Their lawyer, Jurger, their parliament said, we want American forces to stay, 10 to 15,000. Let's work out the details. Karzai's the only one stopping it. So are we just going to pull out? And by the way, he's term limited out. He's gone anyway. So he goes to London with the money, and then the Taliban come back. Are we just going to allow this to happen?
Ryan Crocker, when he was going through his hearings, talked about the Afghan government, particularly Karzai, becoming a second insurgency. Brian, that's what we're seeing here. And I think we can't trust the government, we can't trust Taliban. So the question becomes, how do we work this? Clearly, we want to support the Afghan people. That's why we've been there. That's why we extended. Unfortunately, we have things like Karzai. And let me be very clear on this. I believe Karzai has enriched himself off the backs of the Afghan people. It's shameful. With that said, we've got to find a way to sustain the gains we've made, which are very fragile. And you and I have talked about this a number of times, and I think General Dunford is doing the very best with what he's got there on the ground. The question becomes, how do we deal with a madman? And I think Karzai, because he sees what's coming, he knows the moment we leave, his death, his life will be measured in days, probably not weeks, and he's probably going to want to get out of there.
Colonel, what does it mean to a family member worried about their kid right now serving in Afghanistan, about to tour through? What should they take from these comments and these actions?
Well, first off, the president hugely messed up the strategy. You never tell an adversary where you're going, how many you're going with, and when you're coming out. Because of that, we now have a Taliban which is emboldened. They're getting more and more bold, and our kids are suffering that. I've been up to Walter Reed, and I've seen the results of these IED attacks, and I think we have to consider the fact that because of a bad strategy, we are now suffering through that. Gates, former Secretary Gates talked about that. The president has not been fully behind the strategy, and it's been badly implemented. So we have to consider what's best for our kids and what's best for our forces going forward. If I were the president, I would pull everything down to the level we're talking about, 10,000 to do some training, to do some special operations stuff. There's been some things like village stability operations which have worked fairly well. The Afghan people aren't ungoverned, they're self-governed, and I think we need to focus more on the village level and with the Pakistanis work on what we can do to move forward to stabilize the area as best we can.
And Colonel, the president just does not pick up the phone and interact. President Bush used to do it regularly, like Karzai or not. That was the leader we had to deal with, and the president just does not do it, and I can't think that helps the situation. And unfortunately, it's coming down to the 0 hour. If we can't cut a deal, we have to actually cut out, and it makes you wonder what we've been doing there for the past 12 years.
Absolutely.
Colonel Shaffer, thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian.
All right, 18 minutes now after the hour. Up next, big news for our nation's military members and their right to bear arms. We'll tell you what was just approved. Then, your cell phone doing more than just sending texts and making calls. It could be selling your privacy at a price. How dare you, phone?
So tell me what you want to hear.